I have a stain right here. Oh no, this is my favorite shirt, or one of them at least. It's like an oil stain. Oh well, whatever. We're not fancy here, are we? Hi everyone, and welcome to a new episode of LaRusa Land. I am currently sitting in our new tiki room, and it's beautiful. It's technically a sunroom, but Nick redid it. He did a total makeover, and I can't wait to show you guys the results at the end of this video. This episode is going to be about ancestry and Swedish genealogy research. There are some stories that we hear when we're kids and we grow up and we're told all these amazing things that our ancestors did or went through. Some of them turn out to be true and some of them turn out to not be true. I, for example, was always told that someone on my grandfather's side of the family moved to the US many years ago and got married to John F. Kennedy. No, not the president, but someone who had the same name. It wasn't until years later that I actually wrote to my grandfather's sister and talked to her about this, and it turned out that the man's name was actually Tom Kennedy, not John F. Kennedy. Me and my grandfather really shared this interest together, so when he passed away, I took over and picked up where he left off. But how do we have all of this information accessible to us? How do we know what happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago? Well, in the 1500s, priests were told to, I don't know, maybe by the King of Sweden, to start writing down information about the people who lived in their area. So names, birthdays, the days they died, the days they were buried, married, information too about education, what kind of education they had, what level they were on, little details, where they lived, what kind of house they were in, those sort of things. Now, most of them were farmers, but some of them had especially interesting lives. So here are the weirdest stories I've read about my Swedish ancestors. One of my forefathers, named Brinte, became a corporal, and he was actually held in captivity for 3 years in Preussen, Germany, when there was a war going on. He is also said to have been held hostage by Hundturkarna, which directly translated means dog Turks. I was fascinated by this choice of words, so I did some research about it. Apparently, the dog Turks were monsters with dog heads that ate humans. The King of Sweden was in financial debt to the country of Turkey, and people's vivid imagination in combination with racism most likely was the reason for why this monster came to life and became a reality to people, because they seemed to believe that the Turkish people wanted the financial debt to be repaid by feeding children to this monster, like Swedish children. Like the Turkish people were so evil that they wanted Swedes to sacrifice their kids to this monster. I know that this sounds crazy, but people really believed in a lot of weird things back in the day. And let's face it, we probably believe in things now as well that future people will think is ridiculous. So while fleeing, they had to cross a river, and there was a maid there who I'm assuming maybe worked at a farm nearby, who tried to help them cross the river as best as she could. But unfortunately, in the process, she drowned. And Brinte felt so guilty about this and had such horrible survivor's guilt that he committed suicide and drowned himself in a lake when he was 60 years old. In 1752, a man named Eric in my family was accused of speaking ill about 2 other men. One of the things that he was on trial for was calling the men foxes without butts. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but I'm assuming that he thought that they were cowardly, maybe? Now, this one is a story that my grandfather told me about all the time when I was little, and I didn't fully understand it until I grew up and read about it myself. My great-great-grandmother Anna's brother, Pad, had a very interesting life story that I think might be one of the main reasons for why I am so interested in genealogy research. This man was born in 1850 and died just 40 years later in 1890. In other words, this wasn't that long ago. And yet, mental health treatments looked very different back then. He was noted as insane and kasserad. Now, this is a Swedish word that means like ruled out or put away, put to the side. The reason for this was unrequited love. He loved someone who didn't love him back. Who hasn't been there at some point in their lives? Like, what? We deserve to be put away for that? How insane could that make you? Well, it can make you pretty insane, let's face it. But, you know, do we deserve that kind of a treatment? I don't know. I wish I knew more of this story. I wish I knew exactly what happened. Was he really mentally ill, or was he so depressed about falling in love with someone who just didn't love him back that he just didn't really get out of bed, and people just assumed that he was useless and they just put him away, that there was no use, they couldn't fix him. But how is he gonna feel better and happier if he's locked away somewhere? See, this is the interesting side about learning your own history, because you have so much more respect for where you came from and how things have changed since then. Maybe some things have gotten better, but some things might have also gotten worse. And the intriguing part of it is that you'd never really find out everything about every little detail about people's lives. And that's what I think maybe is a shame now about social media. Like, trust me, I love social media, but it also takes the mystery out of it. You know, if my great-great-grandchildren want to know what I was up to on November 10th, 2018, that they can look it up and just be like, oh, my great-great-grandmother, like, on Instagram, like, okay, that's where she was doing this, like, she went to Target, like, and she posted about the socks that she bought. Now this one, I don't know if I'm very proud of her to say that this happened to my family, but in Ramnäs, Sweden, which is not that far away from where I grew up actually, in Västerås, there was a man who was accused and sentenced as a tidelagare, which is someone who does inappropriate things with animals, you know what I'm saying? He was killed and then burned at the stake in the year of 1771. What's fascinating though is that, you know, there was this whole witch trial thing happening, and yet more men were sentenced as tidelagare and burned at the stake than there was women being accused of being witches and being burned at the stake. The tidelagare situation was more common, I guess. In fact, it got so bad that eventually women were the only ones in certain parts of Sweden who were allowed to take care of the animals because they couldn't trust the men around the animals. I see you. Woo.
I'm just breathing. I just don't want you to film when I'm naked.
Do it. Do it. I find it fascinating to read the notes that priests wrote about people. There was obviously a priority to learn about God and learning how to read and write. But the most important skill you needed to know, that absolutely was more important than reading and writing and knowing how to do that, was knowing how to run a farm. In the notes about a man named Hans Persson, it said that he had a good upbringing and he could read from a book. My last ancestor story is more of a sad coincidence than anything else. There was a woman named Elizabeth, who also had a daughter named Elizabeth. It wasn't uncommon back in those days to name a child after yourself, especially the firstborn child, especially if it was a boy, he was often named after the father. What's interesting and also sad is that both she and her daughter, who was just 9 years old at the time, died on the same day. I have no idea how or why. Was there a fire? Was there a pandemic of some sort that they both died from on the same day? These stories, as much as I don't always find out all the interesting details, it does intrigue me enough to dig deeper. And when you find a little something after looking for a very long time, it gets you so excited, and that's what keeps you going with ancestry research. You just get stuck in this hole of information and you get so obsessed with just finding like one name or one date or something. And when you do, it's like finding a gold mine. I get so excited and the obsession keeps on going. What is a weird, interesting, sad, or funny story that you've learned about your ancestors? Let me know in the comments below. That'd be really interesting to hear it. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, I'm the most active on my Instagram. Just search for Caroline LaRussa. I give updates all the time about my life as a Swede in California. I'll see you there and in the next video. Bye.